Hello, welcome back. This video I am going to show you the part 3 of the series. Last time in part 2, you got a new blue potion. After a while, you found an old man and talked to him. He asked you to give him a blue potion. Then, he turned into a frog after drinking it. He's asking what's happening to him. I was surprised and don't know what to do, but say sorry. So now, the story will go on. In this video, in this part, I will create a new shop. This shop will allow you to buy things in your adventure. This involves the inventory management, and you will start dialogue with the shopkeeper. By using the buying interface, you could interact with the NPC and update the inventory on real time. The whole process you will be able to see how I made it step by step. To access to the objects, a data structure has been established with related lists and dictionary. Here shows part of the objects databases which has different keys such as image, description, and cost. We will be using these databases to update the inventory system in this game quite a lot. As you can see, after the end of the dialogue, the shop inventory was immediately show up where you could buy things through clicking on the buttons here. You could also dispose any item with the red trash icon where the object was deleted. When you buy something, the quantity will reduce by 1, and your inventory will show up that new object. This is the whole process of codes that we will be implementing in this video. So stay tuned and let's get started. We are now in TMX Map Editor. You could find some tile on the right-hand corner. For example, we could take a basket and put the image on the map and resize it to fit. Now it's looking good. Then, let's save the file. We also create multiple layers for the shop. The layer called Transition is for detecting player entering or exiting the shop. Entity layer is for the location of player when entering. We also have Boundary layer, which is for collision. The other layers such Objects layer, Animated layer for animated objects. And for the ground we have the Floor layer, and the top ground is for the front table. If you look at the codes, you will see the function for setting up the map. There's built-in Get Layer by Names function. You can see the layers names here like top ground, objects, Boundary layer, Entities layer, which you had seen in the TMX editor. By these layers, it would create instances of different objects under different classes. That's rough about it to set up the whole map. It's time to build the new map here. Let's call it Shop. Under the Shop key, we used Load Game to load the map under the Game Map dictionary. The agrement to be the path of the file under the data directory with the subfolder named Maps. You will find the shop.tmx. Let's put this path onto it. Now we have our map ready. Next, we would like to build a new class. Let's call it Shop. Let's define self.shop equals shop. For the arguments, at the moment, I haven't have an idea what's inside the argument yet. Maybe we put in some position or something. If we look at the data file I had typed in, it contains the data structure of the object name, which based on the name we could access the image, the description, and the cost of each item. Meanwhile, I had also prepared the dialogue for the shopkeeper, merchant, to say something like, "Welcome to my shop. What do you want to buy?" Now it's time to build the shop class. Let's type class shop. As usual under init method. I think the first thing that need to input and initialize could be the position. Let's define the menu that display the inventory of the shop. Let's say self.menu surface. This menu will contain the following. The shop title, so here we would like to display the text. Down below, we want to display the images of the items in the shop like an array. Finally, we want 2 buttons to be displayed at the bottom. Let's define the menu that display the inventory of the shop. So, Self.menuSurface is equal to PyGameSurface. The argument has to be a tuple, which contains a bracket with two values, let's say 400 by 400. Next, in order to check collision and got its position, let's define the rectangle that grabs the image. Self.rect equal to self.menuSurface.getRect. We define another attribute called self.show. By default, it's set to be false. Next, let's define the font. Self.font equal to pygame.font.font with capital F. The argument being the text type, let's use normal font, and the size is 15, let's say. Now let's render the text. Self.textSurface to be equal to self.font.render with the first argument being the text you want to display. Now let's display my shop sell these, the second to be false and final to be the color, let's say one particular color code. Now let's define a dictionary containing all the stuff the shop has. So self.shop item names, inside the dict are the objects with keys and items. Let's say octopus and value being 1. Second one is the stamp, value to be 2, and the third, let's say letter, the value is 2. The final one is lifepot to be 3. Next, let's make another empty list called self.shoplist, which is used for carrying the images of the objects in the shop later. Let's make a group containing a sprite which is to display the quantity of each item. Now make a self.quantity group to be equal to pygame.sprite group. You may say this is a container to carry those quantities of each item. After that, let's make a function called self.setupShop, followed by self.selectIndex, which is used to keep track of which item we are choosing. By default, the value to be 0. This self.setupShop does not exist. So now let's create it. Def self.setupShop. Oh, looks like I forget one thing. Let's make another attribute called self.shopImages, which is a list. This list is to be containing item image. That image is coming from the inventorydata.py file. Under this sectional, we had some dicts here. Let's import these images from these dicts. That is from inventory data import everything. Let's start the setup. Make two local variables, let test say index and count. We also add x padding and y padding values to be 170. Back to the list, I want a list containing item. That item is to be imported from the game objects with the keys being the name of the item. From the dictionary comprehension, for a particular item name we have image key. So the next key is to be image for item in self.shop_item_names.keys, because we just want the object names inside the dictionary. I highlighted those names I really want in the list. I want to have octopus, stamp, letter, and life potion in the list. So what we want to extract is the dictionary keys. With the key names, we can refer to the images under the transform fixed scale function. If you look for the further this function, it will perform the image's loading. And as you can see under the F string, we need to export the name of the item. That name refers to the image name of the file, where it finally returns with an image of our desired size. Now we have images ready. Let's display them. For index, image in enumerate self-shop images. We want to display item images like this. We want these images in row after displaying a multiple of 3 horizontal objects. To do that, we need X, Y, and we want to import the button class. Let's make an instance of button. We need X, Y, image and scale. X being the self.rect.left and add some spaces like paddings, and then index modulus 3, meaning when the index is up to 3, it will reset back to 0 so that we can only display 3 items in a row. If index modulus 3, which is meaning the index is a multiple of 3, then we're going to add 1 to the row. Let's make the name called row instead of count. For Y, it would be self.rect.top and add some spacings as well, and then row times the paddings. Now the image is actually the image by itself from the for loop and the scale to be default to be 1. So, it should more or less complete the object for the button class. Now let's fill the self.shop list. So self.shop list append and the object to add is button. Let's move to the implementation part. Let's really display what we have just coded. So we used update method to update images in every frame. As usual, we used fill command to update the screen, and used the screen to display the images. Screen.blit, the thing we want to show is self.menu surface, and using its rectangle to be their positions, so self.rect. Now it's pretty much completion of the class. Let's return to the level.py. Now our class is becoming ready for usage. But before we can use, we got to import the shop. Remember that we need to provide position. Let's make it to appear at the center of the screen. The first being screen width division by 2. Now for the Y position, the screen height also division by 2. It's time for the merchant to appear. If self.npc.name is equal to merchant, then we want to make the self.shop.show to be true, which is to show the menu. We also want to exit the menu by pressing escape key. So if key escape is pressed, the self.shop.show will reset back to true. Let's look at the main run loop here. If dialog exists, then we update the dialog. Otherwise, if no dialog exists, then we update the player inventory. So let's add some logic here. If dialog not exist, we're going to check also if the self.shop.show is true. If yes, we will update the shop. Else, if no dialog and no shop show, then we update the player inventory. There should have everything in here. Let's run this. Oh, looks like I got the wrong font. Let me fix this. Oh yes, I don't have this font. Let's change to the correct path here. Another mistake, LifePot was wrong. Another mistake, LifePot was wrong. Yes, there is misspelling, it should be life_pot. Finally, we got it running. Awesome. Let's go to the shop and see what happened. Here we go, we see the merchant has some animation. Let's talk to him. Remember this dialogue. Welcome to my shop. What do you want to buy? And yes, it shows the correct menu. At the moment, we don't have anything to display. Because if you look at the code, it just blit a self.menu surface which is filled with white. Later in this menu, I want to add some items here. It will be shown as the array like this pattern. And there is some names added on the top. Finally, we want to add 2 buttons down below for the buy and exit button. Let's implement this proposal. Firstly, I don't want to have white background, so now I would like to fill with another color. Next, I would like to show the shop information that I had built earlier. So self.menu_surface.blit self.text_surface. And the coordinates being 20 by 20. Let's run this. Looks like nothing is changed. That's because the fill white command is overriding the new color fill command. Let's disable the filled white command. Now it works, however, the text does not look good. Let's change to another font called joysticks. Now let's work on the items display. For index, item button in enumerate of self.shop list. If item button is clicked, then we want something to happen here. Here shows the click method under the button class. If the item image was clicked by the mouse, the self.select index will be equal to the index. Then we want to print this index out in the output terminal. Let's draw the red rectangle around the selected object so that you can visualize it. That's everything we need. Let's run it and see what happens. Here we go, the octopus, the stamp, the letter, and the red potion are all there. And since self.select index is 0 by default, you will see a red rectangular ring on it. When I use the mouse to click on the other images, the red rectangle will show up indicating the current selected item. So it's working perfectly fine here. Great, we definitely get a clear progress. Now I would like to add a state where the player cannot move around when the shop menu is not to display. So here in this delete dialog function that I had made earlier, we add the logic if not self.shopShow, then the player block movement will becomes false and that will release the player motion. Also under this little section, when the escape key is pressed, the player movement should be released as well. So, self.player.block movement equal to false. Now it's time to build some buttons. First of all, self.byButton is equal to animated button. This class does not exist, so we need to import this class. Here is the animated button class details. The first arguments being the name of button, followed by the width and height, and then the positions of the button. The button animation height, and lastly the function. We want this button to implement the function once it is pressed by user. The function I want to implement by the button is the delete dialog in the level.py. However, since the function is in the level class, which is different from the shop class, how can we use the function in another class? The answer is that we pass the whole function from the step where we are creating the shop instance. Remember, when you pass the function, do not include the bracket, so self.delete dialog. It is because with the bracket meaning implementing the function directly, in fact, we just want to treat the function as the object instead of implementing it. Now we have new argument, so the shop class should add new argument, delete dialog. Now the function object is passed to the shop, we can implement it within the shop class. For the exit button, we can do the same. Using animated button class, also we need the text, width, height, position, etc. Now let's make a new method for the exit button, def exit item, then self.show to be false. Self.delete dialog. Now we can add the bracket to implement the function of delete dialog. We have already created the button objects, now we can call this button every frame. That can be done by self.exitButton.draw, because this draw method has been built in the animated button class. Looks like I enter the wrong function here. I should have used self.exitItem because I just built it instead of self.delete dialog. Now let's run the game. Let's head to the shop and see if the button is working. Yeah, here you go. When my mouse is close to the button, it changes color, and when I pressed it, it causes elevation animation. Now let's get to the buy item part. Let's look for a function that I had bit earlier in the inventory class method. If you look at the inventory class, there is a function called add item. This will come handy. But how I can transfer this method to the shop class? If you look at this folded up view, you can see the method is in inventory class. You can't access this add item function as it belongs to different class. The answer is using level.py. If you look at how I create the instance of the shop object, above this statement you could also see the inventory object. So in level.py we already have self.inventory object which is belong to the inventory class. Therefore, we could pass the inventory.addItem object to the shop instance. So, answer is putting self.inventory.addItem to this argument that ends the shop object instance creation. Like before, we added new object, so we need to add back another object in the shop class init declaration. So, let's use the same name for easier traceability. Let's say add item. So self.addItem equals addItem to complete the initialization. Now we should be able to use this function in shop class. Let's activate the self.by button I created earlier. Except that I now need to pass another function called self.byItem. This function does not exist at the moment. Let's create this function now. Under this little section here, let's type def by item, and there is no need to pass any argument. Let's make a temporary list. This list is to collect all the objects named currently in the shop. So it would be the list of self.shop item names. If you remember, it's a dict, so we want to make all the content of that dictionary put into a list. To do that, we want self.shop item names.items. If we want to see what this list looks like, let's add a print statement. Print temp list. In order to show the by button, don't forget to put the draw method in the loop. So, self.byButton.draw and pass our screen for it to draw. Sorry, I forgot to adjust position for the by button. It must not be the same as exit button. Otherwise, you will only see both buttons overlap together. Let's make its position different from the exit item button. Let's make the by button moving to the same left of the menu and keep at the bottom of the menu. Now everything looks fine. Let's run the game. Here you see both buttons were displayed as expected. Great. Let's click on the by button. It should print the list we define in the codes. Now let's look at the terminal output because the screen looks too big here. Here you go, we have a list containing the tuples. The first element is the item name, and second is the quantity. In this list, you could see octopus has quantity of 1, which is same as our dictionary built earlier. Here shows the self.shop item names. Now we could access to the name as well as the quantity. Now let's get the item name. Selected equals temp list. And the element index is equal to the self.select index we select by mouse earlier. We just wants the first element, that is 0, referring to the first and is the name of the object. Now we could access to the name of each item by mouse click. For example, if we click LifePot, we should return the name LifePot. Now we get the selected item name. Next is to call the addItem function to the player inventory. Let's say self.addItem and the argument to pass, as you may know, yes, it's the selected object. Now back to the level.py. Here, if we finish the dialog, we don't update the dialog. So here, if self.shop.show is true, then we're gonna update the shop. Remember earlier that when we show the shop, it won't be able to show the player inventory on the screen, because we use the else if statement here, where you finish the dialog update, you either update the shop menu or update the player inventory. I would like to make one change here. I would like to move self.shop.show down under the self.inventory.update, so that I can immediately see the inventory being updated online. We should have everything ready. Let's run it. As you can see, we don't have any shop items in my inventory. Let's click the buy button and see what happened. Here you go. When I click the red potion, we got red potion. When we buy the octopus, we got our octopus in the inventory above. Now we could buy anything you want, but you will see how the data structure works. Where I select any item, I can essentially show its information. I also can have unlimited buying power, as I have not written the codes for control yet. Later we could add the coins we have and what kinds of things you can buy for it, but it's not up to that stage yet. Awesome! We basically have the inventory system and data structure working. We also have our dialogue system working perfectly. Later we could add the quantity to control, where the player can gain some coins and have some access to particular objects, any imagination you could think of to construct this RPG game. That's the end of this video. In this chapter we had built a shop for trading. In the next chapter, maybe I will start to add some enemies or chest by entering some passwords or something. This story will go on. Please stay tuned and subscribe this channel. Give a like.